Good morning. We're now with our final prequel to the Connected Mobility Hub Investor event, which starts on Wednesday at 12 o'clock CET. We have pitching sessions on the 8th, the 15th, and the 21st, and the 28th of July at 12 o'clock. And then we have a networking event, both investor to investor and investor to startup on the 3rd of September. So even though it puts StartupLabs Spain here, this is a connected mobility event hunt that we're supporting from StartupLabs. So today I'm here with Javier and Gonzalo from Lanzadera. Lanzadera is very well known in Spain, but I would imagine a number of people here connecting aren't from Spain. And so it'll be interesting for you to get a feel for what Lanzadera is and what Lanzadera does. So guys, if you could introduce yourselves, and maybe I see Javier at the top and Gonzalo at the bottom, so I'm always going to direct myself first to Javier and then to Gonzalo. So if you could just introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about Lanzadera, and then we can get into the questions.
Okay, thank you, Tom. First of all, thank you for having us here. For us, it's a great pleasure. And we really enjoy telling Lanzadera to everyone. And well, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Gonzalo Garcia. I used to be an entrepreneur too. I founded a company, a legal tech startup in 2012 called WeLegal. We raised 700k euros. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned, but we learned a lot along the way. And I landed here in Lanzadera 1 year ago, 1 year and a half. And Javier, if you want to.
Okay, hello, nice to meet you. And thank you, Tom, for inviting us to explaining Lanzadera and talk to the Mobility Hub. I am Javier de Toro from Lanzadera, and I work as a project manager, portfolio manager, and investor relationships, trying to help entrepreneurs to raise capital for Lanzadera with external investors.
And well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Lanzadera.
Lanzadera, exactly. Yeah, perfect.
Well, Lanzadera is a Valencia-based startup acceleration program. I don't know if you know Valencia, but you should. We are here at the Mediterranean Sea in the east of Spain. Well, Lanzadera was founded by Juan Roch in 2013. We've accelerated 400 startups so far, and currently we have in our building 200 startups based here. Well, a couple of months ago, we've launched Unlimited, which is basically what we've been doing some research and putting together the inputs of all the entrepreneurs that that went through Lanzadera for the past years, and what they need, or what their needs are. And Unlimited is the result of all of this hard work. With the COVID-19 outbreak, Juan Roch didn't want to ignore the situation. Well, he wanted, he wanted to face it instead, and the best way we could do it was to double up our investment and remove the limits we had here at Lanzadera. Now we have one single program with 4 phases, with investments ranging from 50,000 euros to 500,000 euros. Okay, that's the most important change we've made. First of all, we have to say that it was a presential program. You had to be here to be part of the program, and now, well, you have to be here a couple of days. But we really enjoy having you here, guys, and learning from you. Not only telling you what to do, but learning from you as well.
I think having, as you say, there's 200 startups in the building, and there's, one thing I think you learn as an entrepreneur generally is that the same problems repeat themselves. It doesn't matter what business you're in, what business line, we're facing very similar problems, just with slightly different parameters to them. So I think to learn from other businesses, particularly other businesses are in the same stage as you, so to learn from other startups, I think is extremely important. And I think that sort of ecosystem that you have within Valencia physically, even in a world of remote working, I think is of huge value to the startups. So as you say, even though it doesn't have to be 100% present in physically there, I think it makes sense for the startups to be there as much as they possibly can. So listen, one of the other things that you've done during this period, or in the last few weeks, and particularly Javier has been doing, is organising something quite similar to what we do actually or what we're doing this year at the Connectivity Hub investor event, which is Decks and Docs, which is a sort of an investor community event that's open to startups, both from those within Lanzadera and those that are outside. Can you sort of explain this? Because obviously we've only done 2, I think, so far, so there's a long way to go, and things are being improved on a daily basis. But it's not very well known at the moment. So if you could sort of explain that to people, I think it'd be useful.
Deck and Docs is a monthly event, an investment forum, where 5 startups from in or outside Lanzadera have the opportunity to pitch in front of more than 200 investors. We have launched 2 months ago, and the initiative is gaining traction. We are very happy with that. The value proposition of the forum is that it's free for investors and entrepreneurs. We have a initial session for investors, like 20 minutes, where when we talk something interesting for the investor community. Also, we have a scouting selection committee where 4 professional investors analyze and talk with the startups to select the right ones, and we have the opportunity to have Tom Horsey in the committee and other important investors to select the right startups. And we will be launching new initiative in this way. We want to create an investor hub in Valencia, and the best way of attracting investors nowadays is online. We know that the majority of the investors are in Barcelona and Madrid, and it's very difficult to attract them physically. But in the future, with the situation of COVID will be stable, we will want to have the forum blended physically and online, because if you are an investor and you have an analyst in Barcelona or in Madrid, maybe you can bring in them for one day and visit another portfolio companies based on Valencia and assist physically to the event.
That's a very similar philosophy and idea to what we've used for the hub. Indeed, the Connect Mobility Hub all came out of an event where I had a conversation with Scott Lyons from Ford, and I can't remember the girl's name, but a French girl from Alta Capital, and we said, okay, how many companies, quality companies, would you need there to be in Andalusia for you to visit and see them doing pitches? And they said between 5 and 10, and that's where we're, at the hub we're now 150, and Lanzadera, as you said, you have 400. So I think there's huge value there, and I think there's value as well for maybe international investors. I know the pitches at the moment are in, well, there was one in English, wasn't there, last time? I know the pitches are in Spanish, but at some point it might be worth doing a sort of an English version, or doing some in English, some in Spanish later on. Antonio has asked a question that I'll just answer for him. Antonio, you can see this both on LinkedIn, so it appears on the post, and you can see LinkedIn Live later on, as you're on LinkedIn at the moment, and it also appears on YouTube. I think it's on Facebook and Twitter as well. I'll comment the links in the post. I'll edit the post later on and comment them later on. So okay. next thing, and I think this is mega important for the startups that are watching this at the moment, or that watch it later on and record it. What do you look for startups, both in Dex and Docs and in the Lanzadera acceleration and corporate programs, which we haven't yet really, I don't think, Gonzalo, you mentioned the corporate program specifically. But if you could sort of maybe, Javier, you answer the Dex and Docs part,
Okay.
and maybe Gonzalo, you answer the acceleration and corporate part side.
Okay, in Deck and Docs, we have chose the investment criteria of Rob Johnson, which is an important investor and professor at IESE. And we look for 6 criteria. The first one is the market. We look for big markets and good timing with the trend is growing. Also, the next point is co-founders team. We look for experience, cap table, balanced team, full commitment, and we analyze this information on the deck, and we also have some calls with the entrepreneurs to improve our knowledge on the team. Also, we look for competitive advantages, which can be timing, entry barriers, cost leadership, capital, know-how, traction, and data. Also, we think that competitive advantages is what allow you to enter in a market, but the points that allow you to remain in that good position in the market is the defensibility, which is recurring revenues, network effects, switching costs, and brand awareness. And when we have that, we analyze also the scalability of the business model, also based the majority of the scalability on technology, and for potential exit of the market and startups. Okay, and this is the 6 main criteria we analyze when we are reviewing the decks of the Candocs applicants.
And Tom, for Lanzadera, we do basically the same. We focus on these 6 points, and well, we can emphasize. We actually focus the most on CEOs, and we look for good CEOs leading good companies. And if we see that the person leading the project is good person and a good entrepreneur, we bet hard, really hard. Okay. And I think that's the most important one for us, because we have a strong culture, a company culture, and we look CEOs willing to implement this culture in their companies, which is not an easy thing to do.
Well, you come from a CEO, right? So it's,
yeah.
I guess these things scale down. It's in the DNA of the company.
Of course.
So yeah, no, I think generally that's those are the sort of rules that people sit on, stick to. The defensibility, I don't think is often thought about enough, perhaps by startups, and sometimes they don't think too much about the exits, but obviously from an investor point of view, that's maybe the most important, right? Probably the most important. So anyway, let's just jump on so Lanzadera obviously have a very broad vision of the entire market, what's happening, who's innovating where, and what sectors are growing comparative to others. So what sectors do you think will be hot for investment in the next few years, generally?
Well, that's not an easy question, Tom, but
look into your crystal ball.
Yeah, we have one here. Well, I think fintech and logistics will definitely be 2 sectors that will be there. Of course, will be hot for investment. Well, they will keep being, because they are right now. Due to COVID-19, I'm pretty sure that health will probably increase investment share. We'll see if the total amount increases, though. Well, health startups, they used to face the same problem, that they need a lot of money and time to finally release their products to market. We know that. Maybe, yeah, mobility. Cities like Barcelona or Madrid, they have a huge problem dealing with mobility and the related cost of contamination. This will make emerge a lot of startups in this field for sure. And I think also, but this is like a guess, education, because there are a lot of startups trying to solve education issues. But COVID-19 has changed the way we used to live, and education will suffer the consequences most likely, I believe. That's not an easy one, but I think education will suffer the consequences, of course.
Yeah. And so just jumping into mobility, which is obviously what we're here for. You've got I've got a small list actually here that I'll read out. But you've got a number of mobility startups that have been through the acceleration. So I've got down here Idoneo, which I believe are in there at the moment. Hungry Media, which are also being accelerated at the moment. Momoven, Park Up, Trucksters. You know, there's a number. It's not often that at least in Spain, and not non-specialized investors have a portfolio of 5-6 smart mobility startups. So how have you seen over the last few years the vertical developing? You know, when we started the hub, it's almost 5 years ago now. But when we started initially, as I say, there weren't startups. I mean, as I say, it all started because we were trying to get together 5 or 10, and we thought, how the hell do we get together 5 or 10 startups from smart mobility? Initially focused on, well, we were Spain and Portugal, and now it's pan-European. But how have you seen the vertical developing comparative to others over the last few years?
Okay, Tom, as you said, we have supported more than 10 startups in this sector, so we learned a lot, and we believe in the potential of this sector. Logistics represent approximately 8% of Spanish GDP, and it's growing. And there will be a lot of opportunities on that area. There are almost 1 million people in Spain working for these companies. For saying some facts, in 2015, there were like 100,000 daily delivered orders by day. And nowadays we have like more than 1 million orders delivered by day. This is a huge growth, and it represents a lot of opportunities. I think there will be more cleaner solutions in the future because e-commerce and last mile delivery is growing a lot. There will be a lot of opportunities around logistic centers. There are a lot of investment from private equity and family office buying this kind of buildings. In Spain, we have the huge investment of the Mediterranean corridor. There will be a lot of opportunities around there. Also, we can see here in Europe and in Spain mega trucks that can carry up to 60 tons per truck, and it will reduce logistics cost, the pollution, etc. And there is another important key here, which is the customer has become accustomed to receiving packages in 2 hours, and this is too expensive for companies, even though the big players don't know how to make that profitable. So for the new players, will be very difficult to compete with this kind of standard markets. And I think you know a lot of that.
I know a little bit about that. Okay, yeah, no, I think, okay, logistics, I think is clear, you know, and I think logistics, maybe if we look longer term, sort of autonomous tech, right? Because I guess Amazon did that investment last week, or that purchase last week, because they're thinking about using autonomous tech in logistics. And as you say, I think worldwide, it's something like 15% of the world works driving whether that's buses or lorries or taxis or et cetera, and there's a large proportion of that's obviously logistics. And in terms of the other sides of mobility, so I don't know, sustainability. I think, one thing that COVID-19 has done is everybody's seen how polluted city centre air has been. There was a post that I did for New Delhi where you could see nothing before pre-COVID, and then you could actually see the sun and the trees during the lockdowns. So electric mobility, sustainable mobility, smart cities, shared mobility obviously is going through a more complicated time generally, although I guess scooters maybe slightly less so now. Obviously they had a very bad time in lockdowns. How do you see those parts of the business? I know Idoneo, for example, is a sort of a subscription basis for cars and vans and renting. How do you see the other parts of the other verticals within mobility progressing?
Tom, I think we cannot hear you properly.
Okay.
Question, please.
Okay, am I back? Okay, no, I was talking about. So we talked about. Javier talked about logistics, and I think that's mega important as a vertical. How do you see sort of electric mobility, smart cities, shared mobility? How do you see those verticals moving? You've got Hungry Media, which is a sort of shared mobility plug-in ancillary service. You've got Idoneo, which is a subscription-based private used vehicle basis, but could also be used for other types, mainly electric vehicles, I guess, as a general rule. How do you see the other parts of the other sub verticals of mobility?
Okay, I get it. Well, of course, there's this is a field that is attracting a lot of investors and a lot of investment. Because it's a huge problem. It's a huge field, and a lot of corporates are actually focusing on this. Corporates like Acciona and a lot of huge corporates too, and they are interested in finding startups solving big problems in this field. And yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs are reaching us with their projects in this area. So I think it obviously is growing, and we're interested in listening to all of them and learning from the solutions they're proposing to the market. But yeah, I think they're growing, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of innovation. Just speaking on Friday to I can't forget about the weekend. Just talking to Enzo, the CEO of Homey Hub, the other day, talking. They've got a system for basically allowing smart access to garages.
We know him well, Tom.
Well, there you go. So we were just talking about the use of the garages for electric car charging. So they've been focused more on the logistics side of things today. And we're talking about the electric car charging. You were saying he has a deal with, I think he said, Naturgy and Iberdrola to do this. And obviously I think he said there were 4 million private garages in Spain. Well, theoretically, that's a complete game changer, because it could mean that suddenly you have 4 million charging points for vehicles. And that's obviously one of the issues that's holding back the mass market in a way, because where do I charge up my vehicle? So I don't know, it was just an example of, I think there's huge innovation happening in the sector, and there are huge opportunities. These little changes suddenly, if there's suddenly opportunity to charge up anywhere presented by these guys, I mean, how many other opportunities does that open up? I mean, it's just, limitless.
Yeah, because the problem in this sector is, of course, the infrastructure you need to make it grow. Well, of course, there's a huge problem in the market, but the infrastructure you need to solve it is complicated, and this is a problem that all these startups in this field face. So it's complicated. So, yeah.
To talk about why do you think in the UK we still drive on the left-hand side of the road? I mean, that's a lot of road signs that need to be changed to get rid of that. Okay, so let's jump on to the seed rounds. So how do you see the current investment situation for seed rounds? Do you still are things still stalled, and things were stalled? Do you see them still as stalled? Will that change? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, from our point of view, we have a optimistic outlook. We see that there are less uncertainty in the investor environment. At the beginning of March, we were every day calling investors and banks asking for information, opinion, and nowadays we see weekly rounds, some of them very important rounds, huge amounts, more than 5 million. And I think for the seed round, in certain circumstances, in some markets like e-learning, edtech, telehealth, entertainment, there will be a lot of opportunities because the market are growing, and the ones that were closed during some weeks, like restaurants, tourism sector, they are pivoting their businesses. We have a lot of companies from travel tech companies that they are taking advantage of internal holidays from the Spanish market and trying to pivot their business model, waiting the future circumstances. So from the LP's point of view, we know that the best VC returns were after some crisis. So I think it's a very huge opportunity for those funds that raised all the money before COVID, because they will have a lot of money to invest, and it will emerge a lot of opportunities. So from the business angels and family office, I think they will be more cautious, but the VC funds will have a lot of opportunities.
And just, Lanzadera is an example of that, but also as ourselves at StartupLabs, we very much believe in the benefits to society from startup investment and supporting startups generally, both in terms of innovation, employment creation, links to corporates, etc. So do you see in the same way that Lanzadera has gone, okay, look, we're gonna invest further into this to help support society generally. Do you see any of that coming? Obviously, the VCs have to invest because it's their business model, but do you see any of that happening from those people that are maybe investing their own money? So family offices, in effect, it's family money, even though it's supported by professionals, and business angels, it's their own money. Do you see sort of more interest, or do you see people being a little bit more sort of hands off and scared at the moment?
I think they are being more cautious because they are more risk averse, and even though family office managers don't want to expose their money because they just want to preserve the capital, not maybe the percentage in venture capital will be reduced or stop it until the circumstances will be the previous one. And for business angels, I saw different circumstances. For example, you, Tom Horsey, are investing like in normal circumstances, but another are postponing investment committees and analyzing, but not investing.
But you don't see many people doubling down and saying, Okay. And so, Gonzalo, we'll jump into some sort of best practices, errors that can be avoided, etc., in terms of seed rounds. But as you went through this in a slightly different circumstance, what would your suggestion be at the moment to startups that are going through their seed rounds? They're talking to business angels. You don't know which are continuing as normal. You don't know which are sort of holding off. You know, family offices is very difficult to get in contact with. They're probably not talking to family offices much, and VCs. You know, well, in a way, it should be business as usual. But you know, let's see. Where do you think? Where would you be focusing your efforts if you were raising a seed round right now?
Okay, yeah, Tom. First of all, I think that if you're raising seed round, you should apply to Lanzadera. That's first. And okay, apply to Deck and Docs too. That's the best way to raise a seed round. And yeah. Well, talking seriously, of course, you have to work hard in strategy. We like entrepreneurs who have the right answers to our questions regarding strategy. Well, carefully plan and prepare all the data pack for the investors, because it shows that you're a professional CEO and then that you are we can trust on you. And well, something most entrepreneurs don't actually do is to learn from people who has done it before. Ask to other entrepreneurs who have raised a seed round, and it may inspire you in order to avoid making mistakes made by others before. I could write a book on this, I believe.
That's actually a really good idea, because it isn't something that's done too frequently. And again, it comes back to one of the values of being physically in Marina de Empresas with Lanzadera, right?
Yeah. It's a asymmetric process. From one side of the table, we have an entrepreneur raising its first investment round. And from the other side, we have VC analysts. They are analyzing more than 40 decks per week, negotiating a lot of clauses in the term sheet, and it's not balanced, the knowledge that are in one side of the table. So we try to help them spreading our knowledge on that area and introducing new entrepreneurs to the oldest one to share the knowledge.
Yeah. It's the easiest way to not at least make mistakes and to avoid mistakes. And it's like telling your kid, don't touch that because it's hot. Most of the time they touch it anyway, but you're at least trying to tell them to learn from your mistakes, right? Okay, so let's just jump into sort of the main errors and the best practices that we think startups should be doing. Jose Carlos, just before we do that, sends this, which I didn't quite understand, but anyway, at least it shows pride in his city. So well, I call it positive in any case. So just jumping into the main errors and the best practices. So what are the main errors that you see being made? Because don't touch that because it's hot. What are those ones? And other than asking people for advice, which I think is probably a brilliant piece of advice to give in itself, what would you suggest the sort of the best practices that should be followed would be?
Well, I think first one, you should ask for the money you really need. Don't ask for more money than you need. This is the first one. Austerity. You need to focus on the expenses you really need in order to make your company grow.
Yeah, we can comment each point because I think that there are a lot of stories and explanation.
Yeah, of course.
We used to be entrepreneurs when raising funds, raising their salary a lot and investing a lot in marketing without having the knowledge to do it, outsourcing in the best marketing agencies in the business plan. So we like the entrepreneurs which will maintain their status quo on the company, the culture, not spending money like crazy, because it's the capital for an investor is the most expensive capital the entrepreneurs will get.
Yeah, we see a lot of plans, as Javier said, where the entrepreneurs they have a salary raise in the month they get to Lanzadera. Don't know if it's a coincidence or what, but we're not trying to play this game. We don't want your salary to raise. We want your company valuation to raise,
to grow the company.
Well,
I must admit, I've had multiple issues where I haven't invested just because when I've looked at the financial planning, I see exactly that. And I go, look, if when I set up my I guess as an entrepreneur, you have a slightly different outlook on things as well. But when I set up my first company, for the first 5 years, I received €300 a month in salary. That was it. For 5 years, that was I had to live off what I had, and that was only to pay the autonomo. It wasn't actually salary, right? So when you see people doing that, it's sort of it's an early warning sign, at least, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then in terms of asking for what you need, that's also, I guess, mega important, because the smaller the amount that you need and the better that you're going to use the money, the easier it will be to raise the money in the first place. If you go to your parents and you ask them for a car, you're probably going to get a no. If you go and you ask them for money for a Chupa Chups, you're probably going to get a yes. That's a silly example, but it's a reality. So what else have you seen in terms of errors and best practices?
Yeah.
Because go on.
Yeah, no. Well, a common mistake also is to set a wrong valuation, because it makes really complicated for an entrepreneur to raise the money they need. Okay. Usually we face with extra high valuations, and it makes it for us longer to negotiate the round, because we don't like to negotiate the valuation, but we have to sometimes, because we find mistaken valuations, and that's another wrong situation we face too. Well,
I'm just going to jump into that one very quickly, because that's also a very common error that I see, and I'm just wondering, because so obviously you see startups from all across Spain, and I would imagine that you see something similar to what we see, is that the valuations that startups tend to go for are the valuations of the highest valued startups within their sector or at their stage in Spain, which tend to be startups from maybe Madrid or Barcelona, or sometimes even startups from San Francisco or New York or London, which are in a completely different situation maybe to a startup that's in, I don't know, Alicante, Murcia, Jaén, Cáceres, wherever it be, where you're further away from capital, and that makes it harder to raise in the first place. So you have to be more careful or more aggressive, maybe better said, with your evaluation, to be able to raise money in the same, to equal the balance, as it were, to those that are closer to the capital. Do you find something similar? Do you find that startups, that one of the big problems they have is maybe that you're talking about startups from, I don't know, Albacete, that are looking at startups in Madrid, Barcelona, or as I say, even worse, San Francisco, and assuming that they can raise at the same valuations.
Yeah, well, that's a fact. That's exactly what you say. But another fact is that it's more expensive to fund a company based in Madrid and Barcelona.
That's also true.
They have to set a higher valuation. They have to, the expenses are also higher, and yeah, we find that problem, and I think it's a culture problem as well, because it seems that if you want to have a unicorn, you have to be based in Barcelona or Madrid, and there are a lot of good companies hiding in the rest of Spain, and yeah, we talk with a lot of startups with very high valuation, and with startups based in as you said, Albacete, Murcia, or even here in Valencia with very competitive valuations, and we like to find these entrepreneurs too, and talk with, learn from them.
Well, and actually, at the end of the day, as you say, as long as you ask for what you actually need, and what you actually need in some areas is less than obviously than in others, the dilution's exactly the same, and that's what, you know, they should only, the entrepreneur should only really be focused on, in talking about valuations and cap tables, whatever, should only really be focused on two things: increasing the valuation and maintaining their or reducing their dilution, you know, as much as is practically possible. At least in early rounds, there are many examples of startups that have maybe been a little bit too little preoccupied with dilution in earlier rounds, which then can cause a problem in later rounds. I'm not saying with that as a business agent, I'm not saying that they should go for mega valuations, whatever, but I'm saying that, you know, there should be a balance between the level of dilution, the valuation, the amount of money that you're asking for at the end of the day. It's three parts, three corners of the same triangle, right? Okay, so it's just before we jump on to your number one tips, and then we'll call it a close. To sort of speed up the rounds right now, is there any tip that you can come up with? Obviously, one is apply to Lanzadera, because you are doubling down, and we've just talked about it. There aren't many people are doubling down. You have launched Decks and Dogs, which also assist startups. But are there any other tips that you can give them in terms of how to raise money fast? I mean, I can think of one, which is try to focus on investors that are as close to you geographically as possible, because the further away, the further distances between the investor and the startup at the seed round, I think the more complicated it is that they invest. But are there any others that you can give to speed?
Yeah, I think something that we really like is when we talk with an entrepreneur and he knows what we do, and he knows in what kind of companies we invest in. And that's not a common thing. We don't find entrepreneurs like this. I think the first thing you should do is, of course, having ready all the material that the investor is going to ask you, but as well knowing the investor and the strategy they follow, and of course how funds work. We find a lot of time entrepreneurs that are asking for money, and they ask, what is Lanzadera and when it was founded? And well, it's like, okay, you're asking me for money, but you don't even took the interest of investing a little bit of time in trying to know us and to know who we are, where we come from, and what our culture is. And I think it's an important thing to do, because you cannot talk to an investor and pretend that you don't know him, and trying to, I think that we are going to invest in your company without even knowing you, and you don't know me.
This point is totally very important, because I know I work with that every day. We have a database of almost more than 400 investors, and I know very well the investment thesis of 100 investors. So it's a full-time job to understand the investor ecosystem, if they are investing, if they are stopped. We used to do like in M&A, we work a list of candidates, almost 40 or 50 potential investors, and we work by batch, contacting 5 the first week, for getting feedback, because maybe your valuation is too high and the market will say, and it's better to go by batch with the investor, not spreading all the information the first week with everyone, because if you are wrong, maybe it's better to get wrong just with 5 investors, not with 40. And when you work like that, you lost less time, because if you are trying to sell your hardware company to Encomenda, they will not have a conversation with you, and you will get more frustrated because you receive one no.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Do your homework. I mean, it's relatively simple these days to actually pick up that information. You got to look at Signal, LinkedIn, Crunchbase. You know, there's loads of information out there that you can grab hold of, and you can work out relatively fast, relatively easily, the investment criteria of an investor. Okay, so just the last one. I'm just going to put the comment on screen, because it's Javier. Sorry, I just couldn't resist. So look, just the last thing. If anybody's got any questions, ask them now, because this is the last question I'm going to make. What would be your number one tips to a smart mobility startup right now? It could be whether operational, it could be in terms of raising rounds, whatever. What would be your tip? Knowing the ecosystem, what would be your number one tip?
I think operations is the key here, because it's a very competitive market, and you have to reduce cost and be very, very efficient. And I think this is the most important thing here. Use, of course, a lot of technology to make it scalable and to make operations work as planned. I think that's a good one. What do you think, Tom?
Well, what I think is, you know, I think there are a number of mega trends that are existing at the moment in mobility, and that are going to continue. And one of them, and I think this is important for maybe all startups, not just smart mobility ones, is that there's very much a trend in VC towards environmental issues, sustainable issues. Generally, look at the local elections in France. You know, this isn't just a VC thing. This is a general global trend, right? You know, Jeff Bezos, I think there were 2 things that, you know, he invested X amount of his own money and an X amount of Amazon's money in green funds last year. I think sustainability general, or impact investing maybe generally, are important issues. And so I think startups that focus on that, and maybe even you know, present metrics that in terms of, I don't know, how much carbon their operations are saving companies, you know, whether there's gender equality, racial equality in their teams. I think there's, if they start to report in that type of information publicly, and obviously focus their operations, those who are involved in smart mobility will be focusing their operations on that, so solving those problems generally. I think they're going to be at the beginning of a sort of a curve, because there aren't that many companies that can fulfill those criteria that obviously investors need to be fulfilled. Anyway, it's just, you know, one tip. You could give 500, but if I was thinking of one, I was going that might not be a bad one. Javier, it's your turn.
I will suggest to maintain the focus. The entrepreneurs and businessmen who have been succeed are the ones who maintain the focus in their business, in their daily basis, with an easy way for refusing business opportunities or chance to another businesses in the daily basis too, because it will help you to say no to some opportunities.
Well, I think your tips are much better than mine, but anyway, focus, efficient operations, and then mine was a bit more philosophical, long term. But okay, cool, guys. Thank you very much for this. I think it's been very useful. We haven't had quite as much interaction as I'd have liked, but let's blame it on the heat. And obviously people will see this, as Antonio was asking about, people will see this later on recorded. So just as a reminder to those that are watching or that watch this later on, this is the last prequel to the Connected Mobility Hub investor event, which involves pitching sessions on the 8th, i.e. in 2 days time at 12 o'clock CET, the 15th, the 21st, and the 28th of July, also at 12 o'clock CET. And the first startups that we have are, and we talked about logistics, are the logistics and the autonomous tech startups. So I think it will be interesting. We'll be doing it on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube, and on Facebook and on Twitter. So there are lots of ways to connect and lots of ways to interact as well if there are questions you want to make. So thank you very much. If you're thinking of raising a seed round, your number one tip is to present yourselves to Lanzadera and to Dex and Docs, and that's it from us. If there's any last comment that either of you would like to make, or I click on the button and it takes off the live.
No, thank you very much, Tom, for having us here, as I said before, and thank you guys for listening to us. I hope we can talk soon to all of you. And you have anything else to say?
Thank you very much, and see you soon, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
You gave it away that you're in the same room. You just looked across.
Can remember.
All right, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.